President Clinton knew nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York. That's what Bill Clinton's Deputy Chief of Staff, Angel Arunia, said in 2019. Bill Clinton worked aimlessly to keep his public facade innocent and naive over the years, much like many of the other presidents who have exemplified the role of being the top official in the United States. Bill Clinton, the 42nd president of America, served from 1993 to 2001, a prime time in what would be considered the second longest period of peacetime economic expansion in American history. Despite his public mishaps and humiliating public affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton was well known for the booming stock market and economic recession that came with his presidency. With an approval rating in the low 60s, Clinton was fairly liked by the American public, but much of that changed as his exterior cracked throughout his 2 terms. One of the few presidents known to have been impeached during his time in office, Bill Clinton tended to get his hands tied up in the wrong places. But today, we're going to talk about a darker scandal surrounding Bill Clinton that you don't really see many people talking about. This is not conspiracy, this is not hypothesis. Today, we're going to be looking at the thoroughly documented friendship between Bill Clinton, an alleged predator himself, and Jeffrey Epstein, the most notorious on planet Earth. Now, keep in mind, the Justice Department in the United States, even though they have been covering up the Epstein thing from top to bottom, currently, as you're seeing play out with this administration, they did admit that Epstein had over 1,000 victims in his life. Now, we know Epstein did do that, but we also know that Epstein plenty of young girls to prominent men. But was Clinton involved in all of that? We know Clinton and Epstein were very good friends, but just how involved was he? Today, we're going to find out. Welcome to the Conspiracy Files. Now, before we get into the show, as always, if you want to see the resources that we use to construct today's episode, all the news articles, books, different resources, I always post a resources document in the description of the show so you can go read this information for yourself and interpret it how you would like to. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and I don't plan on going anywhere or doing anything to myself in the near future. In a quick recap, Epstein was an American finance guy, an advisor, and who was investigated for the of minors as early as in 2005. But Epstein's practices were estimated to have started in the 1980s at minimum. Epstein was prosecuted by Florida State for 2 crimes of procuring a child and for soliciting a as part of a very controversial plea deal. Obviously, we know the details of the sweetheart deal there, where Epstein was basically given a slap on the wrist. He signed the papers that were presented to him, which essentially stated that Epstein's going to go down for a little bit of this, but then the other co-conspirators will never be identified or charged. I find that a particularly disturbing facet of the sweetheart deal. But then everybody moved on. Epstein was a convicted, but his famous friends continued to bring him around. Then in 2019, Epstein again was arrested, this time for federal charges and he allegedly died by self-deletion a month later in prison. Obviously, we know that that's not true, but that's just the official story. Now, Jeffrey Epstein was known for his very high-profile clientele list, being a finance guy and a list which consisted of many high-profile individuals in fields including finance, manufacturing, real estate, film, TV, politics, and more. Obviously, we've discussed Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Little Black Book many times here on the channel. By the way, if you've never seen a video that I've done on Epstein, I recommend you start viewing from the very beginning of the series. I created a YouTube playlist so that you could start from the beginning, or you can listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And yeah, I have this photocopy, or what, I don't know what you call it, an accurate duplicate of Epstein's Black Book right here. A good friend of mine was actually the first guy who had this thing published. His name's Nick Bryant. He was the one who got access to the book and sent it off to the press. So here's the Black Book. You can see it's a duplicate kind of what it would look like. There's a lot of people in here that are interesting. I've always thought it's interesting. Alec Baldwin is in here, the actor. You don't ever really see him. I mean, I'm assuming that's the actor, being in New York. You got lots of institutions in here. Obviously, you've got some of the Trump family. Ivana, Ivanka, Robert, Blaine. A classic here is Donald Trump himself. There's a very substantial amount of numbers here for the Don. In his book, he had the name for the White House. Like we've talked about, like Vera Wang, Les Wexner. There's an entire section for Israel, which is interesting. So, a lot of connections. Epstein knew a lot of people. But one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest acquaintances, at least in the 1990s, 2000s, and early 2010s, was Bill Clinton. Now, it's been said that Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton met as early as in the year 1993. Robert Rudin, who was assistant to the president for economic policy at that time, invited Epstein just 1 month after Clinton's inauguration in 1993 to visit Clinton in the White House. Another source in the New York Post suggests that it was socialite Lenny de Rothschild, a Hillary Clinton fundraiser, who introduced Epstein to Clinton, but she later denied this and suggested it was well established that, quote, Ghislaine had introduced Epstein to the Clintons through some White House furnishings fundraiser, end quote. So, in September of 1993, Bill Clinton was photographed with Epstein and Maxwell at an event for donors to the White House Restoration Project. Jeffrey Epstein supposedly donated $10,000 to the White House Historical Association, and between 1993 and 1995 alone, flight logs from the Lolita Express, Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, show that Epstein visited the White House on 14 different days and made 2 visits in a single day on at least 3 different occasions. Most of the visits to the White House taken by Jeffrey Epstein were allegedly directly to the West Wing, making it more than likely that while he was there, he met with the president, aka Bill Clinton. Now, in 1994 alone, Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House a dozen times, including 4 different visits in less than a week in April of that year. However, Clinton's official schedule shows that he allegedly wasn't at the White House at the time that Epstein visited. Reports also indicate that Epstein frequently met up with the presidential aide Mark Middleton. Now, Epstein and Mark Middleton were documented to be friends. They had some sort of a pseudo working relationship. There's a lot to go off there. Like I said before in a recent episode, we could do a whole episode on Mark Middleton and the things that the guy knew and allegedly helped cover up. Middleton's famous because in the year 2022, he self-deleted in a way that is, needless to say, incredibly perplexing. Now, 2022, Mark Middleton, the Clinton aide who was a very close friend of Epstein, who allowed him into the White House many times and met with Epstein in the White House, he was found in an orchard, a grove of trees in Arkansas. He had tied something around his neck and suspended himself from a tree. Don't know how much I can say graphic-wise when it comes to how he did this based on YouTube's draconian laws. But while he was suspended from the tree, he blew a hole through himself using a gun. So for the people listening to the podcast, if you want to listen and watch the videos completely uncensored, I highly recommend you join our Patreon, where I post every episode early and ad-free, and you can help support the show that way. But anyways, it's pretty bizarre that this guy would go to a random orchard in the midst of escalating Epstein hysteria with Ghislaine's trial and new disclosures and things continuously coming out and more scrutiny, public scrutiny on the Epstein affair. And this guy would go to an orchard and at the same time, a guy who would have known a lot of incredibly damning information about Clinton and Epstein's relationship. Coincidence? I don't think so, but I'll leave that up to you. In 1995, while Bill Clinton was campaigning for his presidential re-election, a newspaper photographed he and Epstein at a dinner hosted by Revlon chef Ron Perelman and his wife in Palm Beach, Florida. Other guests at that party included actor Don Johnson, singer Jimmy Buffett, and Don Fowler, then co-chairman of the Democratic National Committee, or DNC. Fox News reported that this was a 3-hour ordeal with a very select group of people who had donated money specifically for the privilege of dining with the president. Additionally, a Vox article published in 2019 revealed that the Daily Beast's Emily Sugarman unearthed a 1995 letter from businesswoman Lynn Forrester, a letter in which she said she enjoyed briefly meeting Clinton at a recent event and that she had used her 15 seconds of access to talk to him about currency stabilization and Jeffrey Epstein. In 1996, Jeffrey Epstein gave the Democratic National Committee $20,000 about a month before Bill Clinton's re-election. It was one of about 450 contributions of that size that the DNC collected from individuals in that two-year election cycle. Epstein's prior political contributions have seemed to favor Democratic candidates or causes, and usually they only totaled about $1,000, which Clinton supposedly also benefited from in 1992, years prior. Jeffrey Epstein also allegedly gave Hillary Clinton's U.S. Senate campaign a substantial donation in the 2000s. Just before the next presidential election in 2000, though, Jeffrey Epstein gave again $20,000, this time to the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, $20,000 to a PAC or Political Action Committee that supported Hillary Clinton's bid for the Senate, and nearly $25,000 more to another Democratic committee supporting Senate candidates, along with several other smaller competitions. In 2002, Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein supposedly had one meeting in his Harlem office, and at around the same time made one visit together to Epstein's New York apartment in Manhattan with a staff member and Bill Clinton's security detail. Additionally, in September of 2002, it was reported that Bill Clinton received a neck massage from Epstein victim and actress Shantae Davies. Yes, Bill Clinton actually received a massage from an Epstein victim. Davies at the time said that Ghislaine Maxwell herself had suggested she give Clinton the massage. So there's actually a photograph of this happening. This is a real legitimate picture that has been verified to be authentic by multiple news sources, and it's a very disturbing photo. It actually shows Epstein victim Shantae Davies giving a relaxing rub down to Bill Clinton during a stopover at an airport for refueling on one of the many trips that Clinton had taken on Epstein's Lolita Express. I mean, just look at that picture. It just screams. It's not right. It doesn't feel right. You know, sometimes when you view things and you think, I don't really know the full backstory here, but something feels off. That's how this photo feels to me. Something feels very off. Now, a New York Post article reported that Bill Clinton, 56 at the time of the September 2002 picture, had complained about having a stiff neck during the layover en route to Africa for a humanitarian trip. The article stated the following, quote, "Would you mind giving it a crack?" Davies recalled Clinton asking. According to an earlier account in the Daily Mail, Ghislaine chimed in to be funny and said that I could give him a massage, said Davies. Everyone had a little chuckle, but Ghislaine in her prim British accent insisted and said I was good. Davies complied, with photos showing her working over the neck of a beaming Bubba who on Tuesday endorsed Joe Biden at the Democratic National Convention. He turned his back to me and I reached up and I started to rub out the kink in our former president's neck and shoulder, she recounted. The massage took an awkward turn when Davies requested Clinton change positions, using a poor choice of words in light of the former president's Oval Office with intern Monica Lewinsky. "I've got a bad angle. Would you mind getting on your knees?" she recalled asking. I'm not at all sure what came over me. For a moment, the room fell silent. I couldn't believe I'd said that. The words just shot out before I realized what I was saying or who I said it to, wrote Davies in her soon-to-be-released memoir, according to the Daily Mail. Then, although his face had turned the color of fire, he laughed. The whole room was laughing too. And being the good sport he was, he sat down so I could get a better angle. Davies went on to maintain, however, that the 42nd president kept his hands to himself. President Clinton was a perfect gentleman during the trip, and I saw absolutely no foul play involving him. Between 2002 and 2003, an official statement from the office of the former president said that he took a total of 4 trips on Epstein's private plane, 1 to Europe, 1 to Asia, and 2 to Africa, which included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation. Epstein's plane was dubbed the Lolita Express by locals on Little St. James because of its use in transporting young girls to be there. Flight logs kept by one of the plane's pilots and used in court proceedings show that Clinton flew from New York to Britain and back in March 2002, and from Atsugi, Japan to 2 locations in China, as well as to Singapore, Thailand, and Brunei between May 22nd and May 25th that same year. However, it was allegedly argued that between February 9th, 2002 and November 4th, 2003, Clinton actually took a total of 6 trips, 2 of which were just one-way flights. All in all, 26 flights were taken during these trips, since several included multiple stops. A New York Post article suggested that it was actually as many as 9 different trips taken by Bill Clinton on the Lolita Express. A fact check article by Angela Fichera and Saranac Hale Spencer in 2019 Epstein listed in detail the details of these multiple trips. So, February 9th, 2002, Clinton takes a flight from Miami to Westchester, New York, where he lives. March 19th, 2002, Clinton was listed as flying from New York to London and then returning 2 days later. May 22nd, 2002, Clinton flew from Japan to Hong Kong. The next day, he flew from Singapore by way of Shenzhen, China, where he gave a speech. On May 25th, he left for Brunei by way of Bangkok. July 13th, 2002, Bill Clinton attended a wedding in Morocco and then hopped a flight to New York, stopping in the Azores. September 21st, 2002, Bill Clinton left for a 9-day trip to Africa with actors Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker, visiting Ghana, Nigeria, Rwanda, Mozambique, and South Africa. While there, he worked on HIV and AIDS prevention projects, democratization, and economic development. He finished the trip in England, where he addressed the Labour Party during its annual conference. But keep in mind, a lot of these details and a lot of the different flights and trips that Bill Clinton allegedly took, according to the documents, he actually didn't disclose with that official statement that he and his organization released. They were trying to claim, remember in that statement, that Clinton took 4 trips during that time period. Now, New York Post has suggested 9, and I do find that number to be a little dishonest because even on one trip, as you can see here in the documents, there are multiple stops made and multiple flights. So it's not just one trip there and then back. Sometimes it's one trip to Japan, then to China, then to Brunei, London, and then back, including flights between all those countries in the middle. So regardless, the numbers don't add up. And there's one of your first real lies, more recent public lies, provided by the Clintons in regards to Clinton's relationship with Epstein. Now, in a 2002 profile of Epstein, Bill Clinton was quoted as saying through a spokesman, "Jeffrey is both a successful financier and a committed philanthropist with a keen sense of global markets and an in-depth knowledge of 21st century science. I especially appreciated his insights and generosity during the recent trip to Africa to work on democratization, empowering the poor, citizen service, and combating HIV/AIDS." According to the flight records, this was the longest trip Clinton took on Epstein's plane, and it accounted for 11 of the 26 total flights. November 4th, 2003, about a year after the Africa trip, Bill Clinton took what appears to be his last trip on Epstein's plane. He flew from Brussels to Oslo, where he had a 2-day visit with officials to work on his project to prevent HIV and AIDS in developing countries. He then flew to Hong Kong by way of Siberia and finished the trip in Beijing. However, another Newsweek article claimed that Bill Clinton had also taken a trip between October 5th and October 9th, a few weeks before that, a trip during which he flew on Epstein's plane from Oslo, Norway to Russia. His 2019 statement alleged that every trip Clinton took on Epstein's plane would have been meticulously documented by Secret Service agents who accompanied them. A New York Times article in 2015, though, also suggested that there were a higher number of trips than reported. Additionally, the Palm Beach Post alleged in 2025 that Bill Clinton took a couple of trips on Epstein's plane in which the pilots indicated there were no United States Secret Service agents aboard. And it should be noted also, most of the entries, most of the trips that are documented within Epstein's cataloging and the documents that we do have and we can see and we have been given access to, they do not note that Secret Service agents were on board the plane, were traveling with Clinton. It seems that almost most of the time Clinton was traveling without that Secret Service detail. Now, this is interesting because it almost directly wraps into the Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, story that I did a few weeks ago, where Ehud Barak actually wrote to Epstein that he wanted to visit Epstein's Island without his security detail, without his agents, which seems to have been a common theme amongst these folks. They don't want to have their protection, but I don't know why they wouldn't have their protection unless they were worried about their protection seeing them doing things that they shouldn't be doing. I mean, if you're a globally recognized political figure, you would imagine you would want these people that are essentially forced to protect you to be with you at all times to make sure that you're safe, that no one can attack you or do something to you. And yet, it's a common trend that we see through a lot of these records and stories that figures who typically would travel with security oftentimes traveled with Epstein with a smaller team than usual, if a team at all. A lot of times they would fly without Secret Service or security detail, period. There's also, with Ehud Barak, I mean, the Israel connection, very bizarre that it's written down that United States Secret Service agents actually traveled with Ehud Barak on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, which doesn't really make sense because Ehud Barak was not the prime minister at the time. Jeffrey Epstein is a private citizen. How and why did the U.S. Secret Service travel? I don't know. Those are just the things. Those are the little tippy top of the iceberg details where when you really start reading into the Epstein story, you're like, yeah, government's involved, foreign governments are involved. But we're focusing on Clinton today, so let's press forward. Now, there's no evidence, and I will say that and be very clear about that. There's no documented evidence that Clinton himself ever visited Epstein's Island in the Caribbean. None of the flight logs list Bill Clinton as a passenger on a Virgin Islands bound plane. However, victim Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who sadly self-deleted earlier this year, well, alleged in her court records that the former president has stayed on the island with 2 young girls from New York. That's a direct quote from Virginia. She additionally stated that she had met Bill Clinton on Little St. James. She additionally stated, Virginia, that she had met Bill Clinton well on Little St. James, aka Island. Now, former FBI Director Louis Freeh submitted a report wherein he concluded that President Bill Clinton, quote, did not, in fact, travel to, nor was he present on, Little St. James Island between January 1st, 2001 and January 1st, 2003, end quote. Furthermore, if any Secret Service agents had accompanied Clinton to that location, quote, they would have been required to make and file shift logs, travel vouchers, and related documentation relating to the visit, end quote, and there was a, quote, total absence, end quote, of any such information. But just think about that for a second. Just because there's no documents doesn't mean that something never allegedly happened. We're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein affair right now. At the time that I'm recording this, the government is shut down, in my opinion, mainly because they're afraid of what's going to happen with the Epstein files. They're almost buying themselves more time to purge whatever they have left of anything potentially incriminating. It's pretty crazy. I mean, it's like saying, okay, on Monday, when this person signs this document, you're going to have to dump hundreds of thousands of papers diving into crimes that you were complicit in. But then they shut down the government and essentially they're like, okay, well, that was gonna happen on Monday, but let's give ourselves 2, 3, 4 weeks to go through everything and clean it up before Monday comes. But those are just my thoughts. Because in addition, as with all of these things, and anytime there's a government cover up, especially with Epstein, I think a lot of people focus on these files themselves because they think they're going to contain these massive disclosures. But we're talking about an intelligence-backed gathering operation utilizing children that were and young girls and even young boys. The youngest, I believe, was 8 years old in some of these allegations, an 8-year-old boy. And these young kids, 2 powerful people so that they could be on camera, and then that footage or those photos used as blackmail against these politicians. If there's documents showing the inner workings of this operation, not only do they not exist anymore, but I'm sure that they were shredded either before Epstein was arrested in the first place, they were shredded or burned right after he was arrested before he self-deleted, or they were just never taken in the first place. I mean, these people have so much power, they have so much control. A guy like Clinton, former president of the United States, one of the most powerful people in all of American history, if he wants some documents gone, they're gone. If he doesn't want something written down, it's not being written down. So that's just something to keep in mind here, because that's just another angle of cover-up that these agencies will use. They'll say, there's no evidence here, this never happened. And I can agree, yeah, sometimes that means that it didn't happen. But you and I, we don't see the chain of custody of the documents. We're not there. We don't know exactly what happened. So I think it's wrong to sit and say that you don't know that something happened with 100% absolution, like you're fully confident that something never happened. Well, at the same time, it's foolish for someone to say, I 100% know with certainty that something happened without evidence. So you have to remain in a gray area, in my opinion, if you want to be rational about these issues, where based on the accusers, they saw Clinton there. There are a lot of disturbing allegations about Clinton, but based on the paperwork, he wasn't there. So do you want to choose to believe the authoritarian government who is covering this up from top to bottom, or do you want to believe the victims, the survivors of these crimes. Once again, that's up to you. But I will say, going back to Bill Clinton and the island, additionally, another Epstein accuser, Johanna Sjoberg, in a deposition, said that Epstein at one time said that, quote, Clinton likes them young, referring to girls, end quote. When asked in court if Clinton was a friend of Epstein's, Sjoberg said that she understood that Epstein had, quote, dealings, end quote, with Clinton. Flight logs also didn't indicate why any of those trips were taken. Now, some of those trips that we talked about, there's the Africa angle, there's the wedding thing. There are some official explanations as to what some of those trips were, but as with some of these other flights, we don't know. We don't know why Bill Clinton was on the plane. We don't know why he was visiting these places with Epstein. We just really don't have any idea. And given the history of the Epstein affair, it is likely that, like many times before, the FBI itself as an organization participated in a cover-up of Bill Clinton's dealings and his potential visits to Epstein's Island. Now, Clinton's representatives have said that the former president cut off contact with Epstein in 2005 before the financier came under investigation in Palm Beach, Florida, for allegedly luring underage girls to his seaside mansion for illicit. In his memoir, Clinton wrote, I had always thought Epstein was odd, but had no inkling of the crimes he was committing. And he also confirmed that he, quote, did take trips on Epstein's jet years before the financier was first charged with crimes in Florida. Then he cut off contact after learning about the criminal case, end quote. But here's something curious. In 2006, Jeffrey Epstein still allegedly donated $25,000 to the Clinton Foundation, according to Vanity Fair, and they accepted the money. And in a 2011 interview, Miss Virginia Giuffre mentioned former Bill Clinton's close personal relationship, the continuing relationship with defendant and Jeffrey Epstein. Now, while Virginia Giuffre made no allegations of illegal actions by Bill Clinton, Ghislaine Maxwell, in her deposition, raised Virginia Giuffre's comments about President Clinton as being one of the, quote, obvious lies to which she was referring in her public statement that formed the basis of her lawsuit. Now, remember, back then, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were facing legal action from Virginia Giuffre, Virginia being one of the first women to really publicly speak out about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and what they had been doing. And back then, because there were claims being made involving Bill Clinton, the thought was that if Bill Clinton himself would just come in and give an interview and allow himself to be deposed and speak on this, he could clarify some things about his relationship with Epstein and Maxwell, but that didn't happen. In an article by the Daily Mail, author Sharon Churcher spoke of Virginia Giuffre's comments at the time, saying, quote, on one occasion, she adds, Epstein did invite two young brunettes to dinner, which he gave on his Caribbean island for Mr. Clinton shortly after he left office. But as far as she knows, the ex-president did not take the bait. I'd have been about 17 at the time, she says. I flew to the Caribbean with Jeffrey, and then Ghislaine Maxwell went to pick up Bill in a huge black helicopter that Jeffrey bought her. She'd always wanted to fly, and Jeffrey paid for her to take lessons, and I remember she was very excited because she got her license around the first year we met. I used to get frightened flying with her, but Bill had the Secret Service with him, and I remember him talking about what a good job she did. I only met Bill twice, but Jeffrey told me they were good friends. We all dined together that night. Jeffrey was at the head of the table, Bill was at his left. I sat across from him. Emmy Taylor, Ghislaine's blonde British assistant, sat at my right. Ghislaine was at Bill's left, and at the left of Ghislaine, there were two olive-skinned brunettes who'd flown in with us from New York. I'd never met them before. I'd say they were no older than 17, very innocent looking. They weren't there for me. They weren't there for Jeffrey or Ghislaine because I was there to have with Jeffrey on the trip. Maybe Jeffrey thought they would entertain Bill, but I saw no evidence that he was interested in them. He and Jeffrey and Ghislaine seemed to have a very good relationship. Bill was very funny. He made me laugh a few times. And he and Jeffrey and Ghislaine told blokey jokes, and the brunettes listened politely and giggled. After dinner, I gave Jeffrey an erotic massage. I don't remember seeing Bill again on the trip, but I assume Ghislaine flew him back. End quote. In a 2011 email by Virginia Giuffre, Clinton's name also comes up several times inside of an email in which Virginia said she had met him on Epstein's Caribbean island, Little St. James, where they had all had dinner, and that Maxwell had flown Clinton to the island as a newly qualified helicopter pilot. The papers reveal that at one stage, Virginia Giuffre's lawyers wanted to depose Bill Clinton about the claims, to bring him in, to get him to talk about it, to question him, to see what's true and what's not. But Ghislaine Maxwell's legal team said that that was, quote, publicity seeking, end quote, and a, quote, calculated media strategy, end quote. Virginia Giuffre's lawyers wrote, quote, former President Clinton is a key person who can provide information about his close relationship with defendant and Mr. Epstein and disprove Miss Maxwell's claims, end quote. Allegedly, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell saw Virginia Giuffre's Clinton story as being a weakness in her testimony. In one of their email exchanges that's now been leaked to the public, in an email apparently sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell on January 12, 2015, he said he was happy for her to, quote, issue a reward, end quote, to help debunk Virginia Giuffre's claims about Bill Clinton and the physicist Stephen Hawking, who was accused of participating in on the island. Now, I'm not making that fact up, and I just want to state with many of these people like Stephen Hawking, no criminal charges were ever filed against him. Obviously, he's dead, but the allegation that he did participate in this stuff on the island is real and comes from a victim. So it's been reported on many times in the past, and I just want to state that very clearly. Now, additionally, in 2011, in an email exchange with journalist Sharon Churcher, Virginia Giuffre wrote about having concerns working with Vanity Fair on a feature about Epstein. Quote, considering that B. Clinton walked into VF and threatened them not to write articles about his good friend J.E., end quote. The claim about Bill Clinton visiting Vanity Fair to kill the article was denied by the magazine's former editor, Graydon Carter, who told The Telegraph this categorically did not happen. The magazine has been previously criticized for redacting allegations made against Jeffrey Epstein from a 2003 profile by the British journalist Vicky Ward, 5 years before Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of solicitation of involving. So there is a documented history of Vanity Fair deliberately not including allegations of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged activity with minors in a massive article that they wrote about him. I actually own a copy of that Vanity Fair magazine with the article about Jeffrey Epstein. We could examine it in a future episode if you guys would like, if you think that would be interesting. So it is kind of a strange and bizarre allegation, once again, that you could see, having happened. According to the article, on Friday, Vicky Ward told the Sunday Times it was not true that Clinton had visited the office, but recalled that Epstein did while she was on maternity leave. And afterwards, her interviews with the Epstein accusers Maria and Annie Farmer, two sisters, were dropped from her piece. Ward also went on to say that, quote, the Clintons actually valued Ghislaine almost more than Jeffrey because she was the gateway to the money, and she was also the gateway to the people who could support the Clinton Foundation, end quote. Victims saying that Clinton was on the island. Clinton saying he never went to the island. The victims are saying that Clinton was flown to the island on a helicopter and not Epstein's plane. Bill Clinton's evidence that he was never there is specifically really the, flight logs from Jeffrey Epstein's plane. But when you examine Clinton's story, they already lied about the number of trips that he took. And then on top of that, you have Virginia Giuffre saying that Bill Clinton didn't arrive to Epstein's Island on a plane. He arrived there on a helicopter, which I've never seen helicopter logs relating to Epstein. So it does make sense. And obviously, they're going to deny all day that Bill Clinton never visited the island if there's no proof of it. Obviously. But it is interesting. Now, diving deeper into this, though, we have to wonder why Bill Clinton would become good friends with Epstein, why Epstein was kind of shoved into his life, and why he fell into the trap and became so entangled with Epstein and Maxwell. Well, former Israeli intelligence official Ari Ben-Menash has alleged that Jeffrey Epstein's operation was created at Israel's behest specifically to blackmail President Bill Clinton. Ari Ben-Menash has specifically stated the following in the past, quote, the Israelis feared that Mr. Clinton, when he was campaigning for president, would be a repeat of Mr. Carter. He wanted to press them for peace with the Palestinians and all that stuff. They feared Clinton wasn't that, but they feared he was that. And I think Mr. Epstein was sent early on to catch up with President Clinton, end quote. It's said that Epstein visited Clinton approximately 17 times in less than 2 years. According to the Daily Beast, Clinton met Maxwell and her husband Scott Borgerson for dinner at Crossroads Kitchen in Los Angeles in February of 2014. This is an intimate dinner with Clinton in LA, a source told the outlet. Think of all the people he knows in LA, and Ghislaine gets to attend. In 2015, in an unreleased manuscript titled The Billionaire Playboys Club, and as a part of the 2015 lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell, victims victim Virginia Giuffre wrote, "The next big dinner party on the island had another significant guest appearance, being the one and only Bill Clinton. He is the only president in the world to be dismissed from his role as a world leader because he was caught with his trousers around his ankles and had the stain to prove it. Publicly humiliating his wife and himself, he retired from his title, but not from his lifestyle. This wasn't a big party as such, only a few of us eating at the dinner table. There was Jeffrey at the head of it all, as always. On the left side was Emmy, Glenn, and I. Sitting across the table from us was Bill with two lovely girls who were visiting from New York. Bill's wife Hillary's absence from the night made it easy for his apparent provocative, cheeky side to come out, teasing the girls on either side of him with playful pokes and brassy comments. There was no modesty between any of them. We all finished our meals and scattered in our own different directions." Though he hadn't been implicated in criminal activity, Bill Clinton's name appeared in the newly leaked documents, all filed in Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre's 2015 defamation suit against Ghislaine Maxwell. His name appeared in those documents at least 73 different times, and he was known in the files as John Doe 36. But what about the 2020s? We're talking about older connections. What about more recent? What's been happening with Clinton and Epstein in the current day? Well, in an explosive Vanity Fair interview in 2020, Bill Clinton's former aide and gatekeeper, Doug Band, said he tried to cut Epstein and Maxwell out of Clinton's life, saying, quote, "I knew in telling everyone to stop, including Ghislaine, that Chelsea and her father would be very angry. It made it harder for them to justify being close to her. Ghislaine had access to yachts and nice homes. Chelsea needed that," end quote. A Clinton family spokesperson defended Chelsea to the magazine at the time, saying, quote, "It wasn't until 2015 that Chelsea became aware of the horrific allegations against Ghislaine Maxwell. Chelsea was friendly with her because of Maxwell's relationship with a dear friend. When that relationship ended, Chelsea's relationship with her ended as well," end quote. In 2020, Virginia Giuffre secretly published an autobiography called The Billionaire's Playboy Club, in which she told of her experiences with Epstein and his rogue band of. And on page 110 of that book, Virginia wrote down that story about that infamous dinner on Epstein Island, allegedly featuring Bill Clinton, that Ghislaine Maxwell had flown him to on a helicopter. But at the end of the story, she said, "We all finished our meals and scattered in our own different directions. Jeffrey wanted his evening massage before bed, and Ghislaine and Emmy went to their office to talk about something, leaving our guest of honor to find company elsewhere. Strolling into the darkness with two beautiful girls around either arm, Bill seemed content to retire for the evening," end quote. In May of 2020, in Netflix's documentary series Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, a longtime tech worker from Jeffrey's Island, Steve Scully, claimed he once saw Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein in the porch area of Epstein's villa home on the island, though no one else was with them, and that same villa is where Jeffrey Epstein was alleged to have held his parties with other guests, and always including teenage girls or boys. In January 2024, NDTV World released an article by Muskan Sharma that claimed that, quote, "In a series of emails to a columnist in 2016, Epstein victim Sarah Ransom claimed that her friend had with Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Richard Branson, and it was filmed on each occasion by Epstein." Ransom's email continued, stating, "Thank God she managed to get a hold of some footage of the filmed which clearly identify the faces of Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Branson having sex with her. Frustratingly enough, Epstein was not seen in any of the footage, but he was clever like that," end quote. However, as the article alleged, Sarah Ransom failed to provide the copies of the tapes that she claimed to possess and told the New Yorker that she had invented the tapes to make Epstein believe she had evidence that would come out if he harmed me. Later, Ransom withdrew her allegations, saying she wanted to walk away from this, saying, quote, "I shouldn't have contacted you, and I'm sorry I wasted your time. It's not worth coming forward, and I will never be heard anyhow, and only bad things will happen as a consequence of me going public," end quote. Now, while Sarah Ransom has claimed that she made the story about these tapes up, it's highly suspicious considering she withdrew all of her allegations after making such big claims, as many other accusers had to do the same things. It's very, very interesting. Now, Sarah's allegations definitely make sense. We know Epstein was recording secretly these sessions between high-profile individuals and the girls and young boys that he was. We know that they were using those recordings and photographs of these politicians or captains of industry as blackmail against these individuals. Our government was using it, and there were also foreign governments, Israel, that were using it. But It's just like any other cover-up. You have victims that come forward and say something, then all of a sudden they change their tune. And nope, never mind, I was completely kidding. Why would they do that? Why would you make the allegation in the first place, and knowing how damning it is, and knowing how big of news it's going to be, and knowing how many people are going to be paying attention, why would you make those allegations just to step back and take them back all of a sudden, and do it in a very suspicious way where you say, you know, only bad things will happen as a consequence of me going public and all this, being cryptic, alluding to the fact that what you were saying was true, but someone's almost forcing you to take it back and stay silent. I mean, obviously we know that happens. People silence individuals that speak out against them. I think that that's what happened with Sarah Ransom. I think that if you don't think that that's a thing that the government could be doing to a lot of these accusers, I don't know what to tell you. Now, in August of 2024, just last year, unsealed court documents regarding Epstein's case were revealed, which named numerous individuals, even though they have not yet been accused of wrongdoing. Fox News at the time reported on Clinton's mentioning in the documents, saying specifically in regards to Ghislaine Maxwell. Here's a clip.
Right, and that was something that also came up in these documents as well. There was an email between her and one of some publicists who was working for her, where she talked about how she was concerned that the media might start asking more questions about her relationship with Bill Clinton. And this is something that I had reported with my co-author Daniel Halper in our book, A Convenient Death, which was that this relationship between Bill Clinton and Ghislaine Maxwell was very close. It was actually closer in a lot of respects than his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and she was kind of this intermediary between Bill Clinton and Epstein, and so that is something that new questions that will certainly be raised for him.
This also appeared to be similar to Trump in a way, because Ghislaine Maxwell was first associated with him. Perhaps Ghislaine played a bigger part than we all had anticipated at the time. We know that she did because her dad was Robert Maxwell, Israeli super spy, but a lot of people thought Ghislaine was more minor at first, more minorly involved. She's still trying to say that today to the Trump administration to get her a pardon, like she's just some kind of little frilly shill that was on the edges of this. Oh, Epstein wrapped me into this. Well, she's not even saying Epstein did anything, but I don't know what it's so confusing because they're trying to say Epstein didn't do anything. So was Ghislaine these women by herself? Makes no sense. It's their cover story for this cover up makes no sense. Ghislaine was minors, which she was convicted of, by herself. Her dad's super spy. She's partners with Epstein. Epstein's the one accused of being the mastermind. All the intelligence links and finance links are there. The non-prosecution agreements, the back office intelligence. And yet we're supposed to believe Ghislaine was minors for just what, a personal reason? She just wanted to people, this British socialite. It's weird. In July 2025, it was revealed that Bill Clinton had handwritten a letter for the 50th birthday of Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. Now, I covered Epstein's birthday book in another video here on the channel, but to remind you, Bill Clinton's letter read as follows. It's reassuring, isn't it, to have lasted as long across all the years of learning and knowing, adventures and illegible word, and also to have your childlike curiosity, the drive to make a difference, and the solace of friends. The Clinton note said. It's kind of bizarre that Clinton's letter mentions Epstein's childlike curiosity. And remember Donald Trump's disturbing letter featuring the naked woman outline, or as some have posited, the naked outline. In Trump's letter, he said to Epstein, "May every day be another wonderful secret." It almost sounds like these letters and the birthday book itself is specifically referencing Jeffrey Epstein's private activities and his operation, and they indicate that the presidents obviously knew about it, despite Bill Clinton maintaining for years that he did not know of any allegations against Epstein. At around this time, Donald Trump also indicated that reporters should look into Clinton's friendship with Epstein, as seen in this clip.
You ought to be speaking about Bill Clinton, who went to the island 28 times. I never went to the island.
Do you maintain you did not write a letter for Jeffrey Epstein's birthday?
I don't even know what they're talking about. Now, somebody could have written a letter and used my name, but that's happened a lot. All you have to do is take a look at the dossier, the fake dossier. Everything's fake with that administration. Everything's fake with the Democrats. Take a look at what they just found about the dossier. Everything is fake. They're a bunch of sick people.
In August of 2025, it was reported that Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary had been sent legal summons from a congressional committee committee that are currently investigating Epstein's case. There were supposedly 8 individuals in total who were subpoenaed altogether, and additionally, it was said that the depositions would start in August and run through autumn, with Bill Clinton scheduled for October 14th. Weirdly enough, that's the actual day that I'm recording this right now. Holy, that's crazy. October 14th. It's on my computer. That's today. The letters from committee chair James Comer read as follows, quote, "Your family appears to have had a close relationship with both Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. For example, your husband, President William Bill Jefferson Clinton, by his own admission, flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane 4 separate times in 2002 and 2003 on trips for your family's foundation, the Clinton Foundation. During one of these trips, he was even pictured receiving a massage from one of Mr. Epstein's victims. Moreover, your husband was allegedly close to Miss Maxwell, while Miss Maxwell's nephew worked for your 2008 presidential campaign and was hired by the State Department shortly after you became Secretary of State." So, as of right now, recording this, the government's shut down. They have not started those testimonies. They have not acted on those subpoenas. I don't know what's happening with them. I don't know if they'll actually ever happen, if these people will be brought in. I don't know what's going on with all of that. But I'm hopeful that they would be brought in and that they would be questioned and be truthful, and maybe we'd learn something. But first of all, I know that you're never going to actually get the truth here. They're not going to just admit. Bill Clinton's not going to sit there and say, yeah, these teenagers, that's not going to happen. And on top of that, my biggest worry is that clearly, if there's one person that should be subpoenaed, in my opinion, it should be Donald Trump. Trump should be sitting down and being asked questions about Jeffrey Epstein in depth. Not that he would tell the truth. The dude lies all the time. And if you want to fight me on that, I don't care, because it's proven. He provably lies all the time, especially when it comes to Epstein and Donald Trump's handling of Epstein. If you've made it this far in the video, regardless of what party you align with, should piss you off, because it's been lies and attacks and a clear cover-up, a very clear, crystal clear cover-up attempt. But my worry is that it would almost be politicizing the justice system, only targeting the Clintons or Democratic individuals, when this is a problem that was both parties, and we know this. It wasn't just Democrats and Epstein. I mean, Donald Trump said the Epstein thing's a Democratic hoax. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that is just insane to me. It's a Democratic hoax. Can't make it up. But we're focusing on Clinton today. Epstein and Clinton supposedly had a strong enough relationship that they were able to joke about a painting called Parsing Bill. Obviously, this is a now famous painting. I talked about this painting recently, and it's an oil painting that depicts Bill Clinton dressed in a blue dress and red heels lounging in the Oval Office. Epstein had this work of art in his New York mansion. An insider told the New York Post that, quote, "It does show how comfortable they were around each other to joke about something like that. Many in Clinton's world are so sycophantic, but they were close. The painting doesn't indicate anything other than Epstein had bad taste in art," end quote. Journalist Vicky Ward expressed her opinion on why Epstein had the art of Bill Clinton, saying, quote, "I'm sure Jeffrey thought it was some hilarious joke because it was so brazenly satirical and would somehow make him look important to the people who he needed to look important to." She continued, saying, "He was full of manipulative gestures like that. He understood that by doing things like that, you just made people like that want you more," end quote. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell was actually present at Chelsea Clinton's wedding in 2010 when she married investment banker Mark Mazvinsky, and it was said that Ghislaine Maxwell attended the wedding as she was a guest of Clinton's ex, businessman Ted Waite. Obviously, we all know that Bill Clinton was accused of several times during the course of his presidency and even before his presidency. Now, there is a disturbing string of crimes that Bill Clinton allegedly carried out, including full-on that never really gets talked about for some reason. And while this doesn't directly have anything to do with Epstein, a lot of this stuff was when he was governor of Arkansas, running for governor, in those formative years of his political career. There was Kathleen Willey, a woman who claimed that Bill Clinton had and kissed her in the Oval Office in 1993 during his presidency. There was also allegations from Juanita Broderick, who stated that Bill Clinton had, while he was the Arkansas Attorney General in 1978. Obviously, there's the Monica Lewinsky scandal. There's also the Paula Jones affair, where a woman named Paula Jones alleged that Bill Clinton made some disturbing moves on her, inviting her to his hotel room where he exposed himself and basically, obviously did some disturbing things to her in 1991 when he was the governor of Arkansas. There's also a woman named Eileen Wellstone who claimed that Bill Clinton, while they were students at Oxford in the year 1969, she said she brought a case to the university. They declined to do anything. There's also a woman named Christy Zerker, a former flight attendant who claimed during Bill Clinton's 1992 campaign, he her while they were on a flight on a private plane, and that he did this while Hillary was sleeping right nearby. Then there's a former professor from the University of Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was at one point a professor, who claimed that he had trapped and a female student in his office while he was there. Then there's Sandra Allen James, a campaign staffer of Bill Clinton's, who said that in 1991 he her in his hotel room, saying that he exposed himself to her and then forced her to perform on him. Then there's a woman named Karen Hinton who served in the Clinton administration, who said that he had her in 1984. And I'm just going to read this to you directly. In November 2017, sources within the Democratic Party told author and former foreign editor of Newsweek Edward Klein that Clinton was being accused of by 4 women. The plaintiffs alleged that the took place shortly after the end of his presidency in the early 2000s while they were in their late teens. A member of Clinton's legal team confirmed the existence of new allegations against Clinton. In addition, there were allegations against Clinton by a woman named Leslie Milwee, who said that Bill Clinton her 3 different times in the year 1980 when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas. Leslie was an employee at a now defunct Arkansas television station, and she said that on all 3 occasions Clinton came up behind her and on one occasion up and down on her backside until he... And that's just a very brief overview and some of the allegations that we know about. I've always been perturbed by how, obviously, so many of these people in power are predators. And not only predators against kids, they're oftentimes just people that choose to hone in on prey, aka women. And they are never held accountable for it, and it's disgusting. Bill Clinton, look at this. Could you imagine if your friend was accused of doing all this stuff? If your son was accused of doing all this, your dad, your own husband, you'd be absolutely disgusted and you would distance yourself as far as possible from this serial predator. But it's never really manifested into anything, and Clinton is still a beloved figure, even though he is, according to many victims, a harasser. Now, I will say it is the same no matter what political party you align with. It's the same thing when it comes to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a known and documented. I know people are going to be upset when I'm saying that, but I don't care because it's true. If you're going to go after Bill Clinton for those things, you have to also go after Trump for those things. And let me remind you, both of these men that are very well known predators, documented with dozens and dozens of allegations, disturbing allegations between the 2 of them. Both of these men were very, very close friends with Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm going to leave that for you to chew on for a second. Because, when you consider those allegations in the context of a friendship with Epstein, it in my mind shows that Clinton, for example, had a proclivity for taboo behavior, and he just did what he wanted to women with no care for yes or no or consent. And from a behavioral point of view, one is likely to repeat a specific behavior, or in this case, let's just specify if it is reinforcing, like if it's motivating, if it feels good, if it makes them feel powerful, etc. to them. So I think it's reasonable to assume that this was a pattern of Bill Clinton's behavior at around that time in his life when he really became good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Starting earliest was 1969. So many allegations through his presidency as well. And even those 4 women who were teenagers at the time that they claimed they were by Bill Clinton after his presidency. What's more reinforcing than... According to Wikipedia, Clinton was accused of several times throughout the period of his presidency, during which he would have been friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Clinton, for his part, has denied the allegations publicly. Just take a look at this clip.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I never told anybody to lie, not a single time, never. These allegations are false, and I need to go back to work for the American people. Thank you.
In April of 2024, Monica Lewinsky herself was asked about Bill Clinton's relationship with Epstein, to which she replied the following in this short audio clip.
Are you surprised with the Clinton and Epstein relationship. What's your thoughts on that? Are you surprised they're friendly?
I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I totally understand you asking, but
it didn't come up during the talk.
I know, but I'm done answering questions for tonight. But thank you so much for coming.
Additionally, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, revealed during an interview at one point that he had dirt on President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Serious enough dirt that it could have canceled the 2016 presidential election if it was revealed publicly. Mark Epstein also said that flying with Bill Clinton was a key mistake that his brother made because it suddenly shined a spotlight on his activities. He said, quote, "Jeff first took Clinton, and I think it was Chris Tucker and some other people, to Africa, which was a mistake my brother made by doing that because prior to that he was under the radar. Nobody was looking at him. But when he flew Clinton there, it was like, who's this guy flying Clinton?" End quote. Now, in the context of this story, I want you to remember as well the Justice Department and all these people. Here's Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, who is saying in interviews he's privy to damning information about Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise and activities. Why don't they interview him? Why doesn't Donald Trump send Todd Blanche if he actually wants to get to the bottom of Epstein, like all of his supporters thought he did? I knew that he didn't, but his supporters thought he did. He wanted to expose this for what it was. Trump even said it in his old interviews. Why wouldn't they send that guy Todd Blanche to go talk to Mark Epstein and get some information from Jeffrey Epstein's brother? Why wouldn't they send Todd Blanche to interview victims? Why wouldn't they send Todd Blanche to interview literally anybody other than the perpetrator? Because remember, they sent him there to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, and of course she denied everything and said the president is an amazing man and she never saw him act unbecoming and blah blah schmooze. Trump a few days ago, just check this clip out, he recently said he barely even remembers who Ghislaine Maxwell is. Look at this in the Oval Office.
The Supreme Court is back in session. They rejected today appeal by Ghislaine Maxwell to overturn her conviction. That means her only chance at getting out of prison is a pardon from you. Is that something you're open to?
Who are we talking about?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
You know, I haven't heard the name in so long. I can say this, that I'd have to take a look at it. I would have to take a look. Did they reject that?
She wanted to appeal her conviction.
And what happened?
They said that they were not going to hear her appeal.
I see. Well, I'll take a look at it. I will speak to the DOJ. I wouldn't consider it or not consider it. I don't know anything about it. So, but I'll speak. I will speak to the DOJ.
Why would she be a candidate for clemency?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to speak to the DOJ. I'll look at it. I have a lot of people who have asked me for pardons.
And then on top of that, I just read this article, this reporting just dropped, saying that at around the same time that Todd Blanche, the guy Donald Trump sent to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, before he arrived at the prison she was being held at, and after, there were these mysterious people who were allowed into the prison who went and met with Ghislaine Maxwell. And other prisoners said that when Ghislaine left that meeting, she was smiling ear to ear. She was incredibly happy. They asked her what the meeting was about. She wouldn't say. She was having these secret meetings in prison with secret individuals, like the Men in Black almost. I mean, this just gets weirder and weirder by the day. Bill Clinton at one point wrote in his memoir, "The bottom line is, even though it allowed me to visit the work of my foundation, traveling on Epstein's plane was not worth the years of questioning afterward. I wish I had never met him." Much of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton is clouded by current affairs, namely our current president's adamant denials of him being included in the Epstein files in the first place or having had any relationship with the financier in general. However, based on the evidence we've seen today and also what we know about Epstein's activities, I think it's very safe to say that Bill Clinton was tied up in the web of lies and potentially in the web of and blackmail that Epstein surrounded himself with, that Epstein cast out, just like many other prominent people were as well. Now, Jeffrey Epstein was known to promise his girls things, to give them money, trips, pay for their schooling. So Epstein flying Clinton to and from his work at a charity foundation he was passionate about doesn't seem irrational. However, with that in mind, it appears as though there's possibly more than meets the eye here. We know Epstein pretended to be generous to his clientele, but he held more dirt on these people than anyone else could have ever known. And obviously copious amounts of videotaped, photographed. So, what's Bill Clinton hiding? I guess we're just going to have to wait and find out. Now, we could go in depth with Jeffrey Epstein and those visits to the White House and tons of money that went missing and Hillary Clinton's law firm and Bill Clinton's groups and their ties to intelligence bodies and agencies and even foreign intelligence. And we could talk about the weird computer technology shell companies that the Clintons were involved in and representing in Arkansas and this black money that would travel through and disappear. And the Clintons are extremely corrupt. I mean, corrupt to the absolute core. I definitely think Donald Trump is as crooked as could possibly be. But when it comes to the Clintons as well, it's astounding, especially if you read One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb, spelling out the connections between the Clintons and all of these bizarre companies and agencies is frankly very disturbing. And you've also got the whole Whitewater affair and the Clinton body count and all of that. So there's no doubt in my mind, I believe Clinton knows much more than he lets on about, and that he participated in Epstein's little freak show circus in a much more personal way than he's ever talked about publicly. Hopefully we'll get some disclosures in the future, but for now, that's kind of like a surface level look at Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship. As I always say with these episodes, I know I tend to talk a lot of and some people don't agree with my political stance. That's completely fine. I try to keep politics really out of this show, but I do believe that corruption is a really bad thing. Lying is a very bad thing. And when you have people in power that are lying and abusing their power, especially when you are zoomed in on this Epstein thing and nobody's telling the truth, it should show you that, yeah, you could disagree with the politics and the morality and, what you want to see in the legislation in America. But I think we can all come together and agree that our presidents or policymakers should not be lying to the American public, and they definitely, above all else, should not be covering for sadistic. They should not be engaging in with children. They should not be covering up child. And it's funny, for years it was almost like the boogeyman of child. Those things were anything everybody could talk about. But in my opinion, and we're going to talk about this more later on, I think those were disinformation campaigns because they knew the Epstein thing was coming soon. And remember, back when Epstein, all that first happened, the media attacked people who were talking about Epstein and said, "You're just a guy and you're just a crazy conspiracy theorist." And they're still milking that to this day. It's still the same thing is going on, but we're never going to get transparency. Everybody was involved. Both parties were involved, Republicans and Democrats, as well as captains of industry, Hollywood people, musicians, all sorts of individuals. They were all tied up in Epstein. So you always wonder, how do you keep a secret with so many people involved? Well, it's like the dominoes. One person goes down, everybody could potentially go down. So it's a secret that has been protected by death, been protected by document destruction, been protected by witness intimidation, forced self-deletion, and so many different things. But thank you guys for listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I will catch y'all next week. Please be sure to leave me a like and a comment on this video, letting me know what you thought about today's episode. I know this is going to be a polarizing one, but I can't thank you all enough. If you listen to the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, which you can listen on and the show's fully uncensored, please be sure to leave me a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show. And as always, keep that tinfoil hat on, stay suspicious, always question everything, and I'll see you guys next week.